Most retirees rely on selling shares to cover expenses, but that slowly erodes your portfolio. What if your portfolio could generate 8 to 10% income annually from dividends and distributions alone, so you never have to sell shares? Today, I'll show you how a 4-fund portfolio built with a variety of funds can deliver just that, reliable income while preserving your principal. We're going to be looking at the exact 4-fund allocation to hit 8 to 10% income yield, how 500K invested this way can generate $40,000 to $50,000 a year income, why this income-first approach beats selling shares in retirement, and how to maintain or grow your portfolio with this strategy. So stay tuned. Welcome back to Simply Money. Today we're going to be looking at a 4-fund portfolio and how you can generate 8 to 10% income while still seeing your portfolio grow. Here's the recommended allocation based on yield assumptions. We have the covered calls. We're going to use JEPQ and JEPI. You can use one or the other, or if you really want to diversify, you can split this section with a little bit of each. So you have 40% allocation. That'd be 20% in JEPQ, 20% in JEPI, or all 40% in one or the other. That's really up to you. If you want more diversification, you can split it 20% each. That would yield about 9.4%. Then we have the high income ETFs, your SPY, your QQQI, and IWMI. Again, you can pick one. Or if you like diversifying, you can put a little bit into each. We would say 10% into each or 30% into one. That would bring you about 13.2% yield. Then we have our dividend growth. This is SCHD. This is to provide growth in your dividend over time and would allocate 20% to that, which is bringing in 3.8% yield. Then we have our growth, SCHG or VGT, or again, a combination of both. There's really no dividend on this. It's 0.39%, but this is the growth portion of the fund. This is what's going to drive the growth to keep your portfolio balance up higher. Then you may have to rebalance this portfolio periodically, especially if you're spending down and using the income. And that's what you'd have to keep track of and keep an eye on in retirement. Let's break down the income contribution by fund. With the covered calls, which is 40% of your portfolio, it's yielding 9.4%. That brings 3.76% total return for you on your income. The high income ETFs, they're going to produce about 3.96%. That's how much they're contributing to your portfolio yield. The dividend growth, because it makes up 20% of your portfolio with a 3.8% yield, is going to contribute 0.76% to your portfolio yield, your how much income you're taking from this. And your growth, your SCHG or your VGT, at 10% weight and a 0.39% yield is only contributing about 0.04% to your portfolio yield. At these allocations, it brings in about 8.52% yield. That's how much your $500,000 is going to bring in, 8.5% yield. Now, looking at these funds in particular, I took all of their 5-year CAGRs and averaged out what it would look like based on these allocations. So if you had 40% in your covered calls and 30% in the high income ETFs and 20% into growth dividends and then 10% in growth, you would be looking at about a 5-year growth rate of 4.7%. Not only are you getting this income, but your portfolio balance is growing at a rate above inflation, which is great because that's actually going to continue to produce higher and higher levels of distribution, because your 8.52% is going to stay fairly flat because it is based on your portfolio. So as the portfolio gains momentum and grows, that's going to be what brings you your dividend increase and your pay raise in retirement. What this would look like over the course of years, starting portfolio of $500,000, it would produce the first year $42,600 of dividends and distributions. Year one, you're looking at, because you've now had a year for it to grow, you started out with $500,000, you're earning $42,600 in distributions, your portfolio over the year would grow on average. Again, this is average of $15,000, a growth rate of 3%. Even though I averaged it out to 4.7%, I'm going with a more conservative rate of 3% here just to show you what it would do even with a lower growth rate. At the end of that year, you'd be at $515,000 and your portfolio would pay you about $43,878. We can go down here. We'll skip down to year 5. You can see the portfolio is now grown to $579,000 and it is producing about $49,000 a year. As you can see, year over year, you're getting small incremental pay raises each year. As you skip to year 10, you see your portfolio has done a nice job growing to $671,000, almost $672,000. It's growing by about $19,500 per year, and you're getting income of about $57,000. At 20 years, you're looking at $875,000 with an income of about $74,000. So some of the benefits of this is you have your income on $500,000 based on this 8.52% yield, bringing in $42,600 of cash flow. There's no need to sell shares. You can live off the distributions. Now, obviously, that's if you can live off $42,000. This isn't a one-size-fits-all. This is just showing what kind of income you can produce off $500,000. Whereas if you went with the sell shares and used the 4% rule, your first year you'd be looking at $20,000, and then that $20,000 the next year would be based on whatever inflation. So $20,000 plus the inflation rate would be your second year. So by the time 10, 20 years down the road, you might be getting up to this point where you're getting your $42,000, but you're starting out with that. Now, the thing to look at as well is you have that section with the portfolio growth that adds potential capital appreciation. And this strategy balances high income with portfolio stability. Now, we want to look at this as well. This is if you were not taking the distribution. So for a lot of people, they want to get into the high income, get their yield where they want it, but then let it snowball for a few years or maybe for many years before they start drawing out and using those distributions. They're doing an income snowball on their dividends. This would be reinvesting all your distributions. And we're going to look at this at $500,000, again, with the 3% growth. You're getting the $42,600 distribution that you would buy back into this. In addition to the $15,000 appreciation, that would bring your ending balance up to $557,000. As you continue to reinvest these distributions, you can see that your growth is exponentially faster because you're adding in this amazing distribution month over month, annually, and it's growing that. So if you wanted to do this for 5 years to build your not only your portfolio, but look what your income is. Let's say you were to do 5 years, now you're at $954,000, and you say, okay, now I'm going to start living on just the distribution. You're still having this portfolio growth, but you're grabbing $73,191 of income right out of the gate. This is heavy income focus with cover calls and high yield ETFs. Now we're going to look at this on the Simply Money retirement template. Some of you have seen this in other videos, and if you'd like a copy of this to play around, you can find that in the link down below on the Buy Me a Coffee. Just go to the shop section of the Buy Me a Coffee page. There's a tab at the top that says shop, and you'll see all of our spreadsheets there if you like playing around with those. I appreciate the support for those who have supported the channel. Thank you very much. It means a lot to us. Now in here in the yellow fields is what we fill in, and this is what we change depending on what you're wanting to look at. We're looking at the starting balance of $500,000 of income needed is $45,000. We're doing the annual rate of return. I put the 4.7%. With the funds that we've been talking about, the average 5-year CAGR has been 4.7%. So we're using that in this template. We're using inflation rate of 3%. That's what the average has been over long term. So we're just going to use that for 3 years. We want to see how this does for 40 years. Now, a lot of times you can change that if you want to start at, say, 60, whatever year you want to start at, and say you only want 30 years. To see if it'll last that long. You can put that in here. I'm going with 40 years because we're looking at somebody wanting to retire early, trying to get out of the workforce. We want it to last until at least 90 years old. As you can see down there at 90, they can continue to retire. We're going to look at this inflation adjusted withdrawals, meaning that each year you need more money because of the inflation. You can turn that off by typing no there and simply say, I want a flat amount. Say you want to compare it to an annuity, which pays a set amount for the life of the annuity, but it doesn't have increases. Maybe you want to compare it to that. So you can turn that off. That's why that's there. We're putting the dividend yield at the 8.5%. Now, again, with the allocations that we have, if you wanted to go up on that a little bit, you could put a little higher percentage into the high yielding covered calls or the ETFs like QQQI. Or if you wanted it to go down a little bit and be a little bit more conservative, you could put a little bit higher allocation into SCHD or SCHG for more growth. And then, so it's really just up to you, but we're using the 8.5% that we would get based on the allocations that we just showed you. The dividend growth, we're leaving that flat, meaning the dividends are going to pay that 8.5% based on whatever the portfolio balance is. It's very static that way, I understand, but we're just doing that for this scenario here. We're putting one Social Security in at $12,000 or $1,000 a month, which I know is very low. You may have a spouse, you may not. You may have way more than that, but we're putting a very conservative number in there. Whether you have Social Security, we have another tab here where we can look at pensions, but I'm just doing a very minimal amount here to show what it is capable of, and that would start in at age 62, and we're starting retirement age at age 50. Okay, so what we have here is you have your $500 balance, the income that we said we needed, how much your dividend payment would be, and then your total income, which is all of these added up. You have your dividend payment, your Social Securities, which we have 0 on these two for this year. So that's your total income, which means for this need, you'd have to pull out $2,500. And we slide over here and see that's a 0.5% withdrawal. You're not going to deposit anything, so that's your ending balance based on the growth that we have. And so you start out the next year with $520,000, and you can see how that goes. Your income need goes up because of inflation. Your dividend payment stays flat. If we were to change this CAGR, let's just say we went with 1%, again, very minimal, but we're just going to do that. You can see that goes up slightly each year. But if you notice, it made a big difference here where your trajectory just continues to go on your balance. If we go back to the 0 here, you can see it's still, you finish the 40 years, but your trajectory starts curving down because you're starting to need to take out more than it's producing because this is flat and your income need is growing by 3% year over year. This is not going to stay flat. You could put probably 2% in there. Depends on which funds you have. But as this balance goes up, the 8.5% is going to be based off this balance. But we went with a very static rate where it's based off this initial 500, which is very, very conservative for those who are wondering. And that's why I do that to show what is possible even on the most conservative approaches. As you see here, at age 62, Social Security kicks in. Your need is up to 64,000, and you're still only getting that 44,000. But now you add in the 12,000 Social Security, and that brings us up to 56,000 of income that you made. So you now, compared to the last year where you had to withdraw 18,000, now you're back down to only needing to draw 7,800. Here's how you can play with this. If you want to change the CAGR to 2%, you can see how big of a difference that makes. This trajectory, you're just growing that fund because you're taking out way less. If you want to put this up to 60,000 to see, can I live on that? You can see that this one draws it down. You get to age 85 though, so there's room there for growth to see how far you can get with that. We'll go back to the 45,000. We'll go down back to the 0 here. Maybe your Social Security is 1,500 a month, so you put 18,000 there and see what it does. And you see how that, where that curve started going down, it actually shoots it up because now you're not actually needing to withdraw as much again. There's just a lot of variables that you can put in here and play with this, but that is based on this 4-fund allocation that we just showed you. What are your thoughts? Do you like any of those funds? Are you in any of those funds? Do you think this is too aggressive? Or are you one that would rather have growth funds and just sell shares as you need it and worry about sequence of returns and use the bucket strategy. What is your strategy compared to this? I'm not saying to do this. This is not financial advice. I'm just showing you what could happen and a great allocation to get to that 8.5% yield on this. I appreciate you joining me, and I'll see you next time on Simply Money.